Now, the government is set to set out plans for COVID booster jabs as ministers unveil their blueprint for living with the virus through the winter. It's expected all over 50s will be offered a third jab, starting with the over 70s and the most vulnerable. And the shot of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine will be administered at least 6 months after the second dose. Amid concerns the protection it gives to older people fades over time, ministers believe it will help ensure the NHS is not overwhelmed by new cases of the disease as it moves into the autumn and the winter.
Yes, absolutely. We can't possibly have the NHS be overwhelmed. Now, to discuss this further, social commentator and host of the podcast Rich Politics is the one and only Richard Taylor. Richard, thank you very much for making the effort to come into the studio for us as well.
It's nice to get out of Wales, to be honest, and come to London and see all the magic happening here, you know, because we're still on horse and cart and carriage back in Wales, you know. It's a bit...
And the streets really are paved with gold, aren't they?
Well, they certainly are, apart from the rain. I wasn't expecting the rain. I'm used to rain coming from Wales anyway, so it's easy for us, you know.
Well, look, obviously, just talk to us a bit about the predictions, as it were, for the winter plan. The booster jabs to start with. What's your views and all of
Well,
this?
I always ask the question, where does this end up? You know, we've had the vaccine, they said it was the answer, it was the way out, it was to flatten the curve, protect the NHS. The reality is the NHS has been in an absolute... It's been in a mess before the pandemic, let's be honest. Especially in Wales, the Welsh NHS has been on its knees. 5 out of 7 of our health boards have been in special measures. I know England's had its problems with waiting lists and operations cancelled, ambulance waiting times, A&E. I mean, that happened before the pandemic, and that's down to the fact that the NHS needs to be reformed. We're paying, you know, ridiculous salaries to senior managers, 250 grand a year, middle management as well. That money, rather than raise national insurance contributions, as Boris has done, which he said he wouldn't do as a guarantee in his manifesto, I mean, why don't they cut some of those high-paid salaries, put it to nurses and doctors on the front line and use that money rather than tax people like myself and others, working-class families across the country? And I think, you know, it's not just about what the government are doing now with the NHS, it's what's been happening for years. You know, we've had a pandemic in the NHS for the last 20, 30 years, and it's never been resolved under Labour, under the Conservative government, and it needs serious attention. Someone needs to look at that.
And talking of vaccines, I mean, of course, now the JCVI have said, no, we shouldn't vaccinate healthy 12 to 15-year-olds, but now we know that the Chief Scientific Officer, or is it the Medical Officer?
Chief Medical Officer, yeah, the four of them, yeah. We've got Chris Atherton in Wales, and you've got Chris Whitty up here, you know. I mean,
the Chief Medical Officer has basically said, no, the government can go against that advice and should jab 12 to 15-year-olds, healthy 12 to 15-year-olds.
Well, listen, I'm absolutely appalled. I'm disgusted by it. I've got to be honest. To hold my anger back today is very difficult for me because, first of all, I'm a father. I've got 3 children in that category. I'm not an anti-vaxxer. 2 of my eldest children have had the vaccine. They're 21 and 20. They're adults. It was their choice. But for me as a father, I've already emailed my school, my local MP, and said I do not consent to my children having this vaccine because, you know, they don't need it. Because, look, the data and the statistics tell us otherwise. That's why the JCVI have advised the government that, you know, children are not vulnerable. You know, the benefits don't outweigh the risk. The risk doesn't outweigh the benefits. So why are we injecting our children with a medical intervention when we have no long-term data? Studies have been done in America to show that children are 6 times more likely to get, you know, inflammation of the heart and other conditions as a side effect of the vaccine. We've got no long-term data. What is this government doing? I personally have lost all confidence in the government. I think public trust has been eroded. We can go back as far as Brexit. It wasn't a full Brexit, the Northern Ireland Protocol. We had the fishing waters, you know, we're still being plundered by European vessels coming in. So it wasn't a complete Brexit as we thought it would be. Then after Brexit, of course, we've had the vaccine passports, flip-flopping, yes, no, yes, no. I mean, make your mind up. It reminds me of the scene from The Vicar of Dibley, you know, that Jim, no, yes. Nadeem Zahawi, no, yes. You know, I mean, the government really, I think that the public trust has been eroded for a lot of people, like myself and the people I speak to, you know. I'm talking about the non-political bubble now, you know, the local rugby club in Wales, you know, the real people, you know. And I think the government, you know, are in a very precarious position at the moment, and people are seeing it. And I think it's going to take a political revolution to change anything because we've got no opposition. I mean, what are Labour actually doing? Why are they there? Why do they even exist? At least have the gumption to stand up and say, if, for example, if Keir Starmer stood up and said, we're against vaccine passports, I mean, the Lib Dems have said it, you know, they're normally irrelevant, but in this case, they seem to agree with them. If they got up and stood against something and actually opposed the government, we're opposed to injecting children with a vaccine that has no long-term data, there is no need to do it, why are you doing it? And the chief medical officers, the reason they've given is not a medical one, it's to do with their mental health. Mental health. The government are responsible for the mental health damage they've done to our children in lockdown.
Yeah, well, that's a massive point. That I think the idea now that Chris Whitty wants to stand up in front of us and talk to us about children's mental health, given some of the measures that have been put in place throughout this pandemic and given some of the way in which those things have been portrayed to us, your daily rolling death tolls, don't kill grandma over Christmas, all this kind of stuff. I personally find it hard to believe that Chris Whitty has any right to talk to me about any child's mental health. There is a flip side to this, and it's important to put that across, and that is that there are still swathes of the adult population who haven't had the jab. There are still vulnerable people out there. We know, for example, that just because you've had the jab, it doesn't necessarily always stop you getting ill from it, and by vaccinating kids as young as 12 years old, it might actually save grandma.
Yeah, I think you're right, Dan. You've got to look at the other side as well. There's two sides of every argument. I think another part of what concerns me about this whole thing at the moment is we're not getting any information or data on side effects from the vaccine. The government are very slow to publish it. I know there's a yellow card published on the government's website, but they can't confirm that, these side effects are from the vaccine. The government are keen to publish deaths. Died within 28 days of having COVID. Doesn't mean they died from COVID, but they died with COVID. I think that needs to be transparent on what that looks like and what it means. I think also, the side effects, they need to be published and to let people know, the public, so an informed choice to consent to having a vaccine needs to be under transparency and truth. We need to know, what's going on. I mean, don't forget, when the pandemic hit, I mean, we were all, I suppose I was as well, we were like, OK, let's do what the government says, no problem whatsoever.
Absolutely.
And a vaccine was found in record time. I mean, in record speed. And we didn't question it. And people said, oh, great. So, December came, they started rolling it out. And we said, we're going to do it for the elderly and the vulnerable. And what I've seen, this sliding scale. So the elderly and the vulnerable and those with underlying conditions. And we've gone down the age brackets, right down now to 12-year-olds. I mean, where is this going to go? Are we going to start talking about children younger than 12? I mean, God forbid that would happen. But I fear, because I have no confidence in this government, that that's where this is going to play out. And I think a lot of people out there feel the same and they're concerned. And as I said, it's not about being anti-vax. It's just a case of that's the reality of where we're at.
Well, if one of the reasons which it is to try and keep the kids in school, well, the same surely applies to younger children as well. So, it might end up there.
Yeah, well, the virus didn't shut the schools. The government did. We must remind ourselves it's the government that are responsible for these draconian measures and lockdowns that we've seen. I mean, we'll probably come to it later, especially in Wales. I mean, we've had some serious lockdowns in Wales, and we've had some of the highest death tolls in Wales. So, does it translate?
So what would you like to see from Boris Johnson in this winter plan? Ministers, Boris Johnson is set to announce. What measures do you want to see, both, UK-wide and in Wales? It's different. It's a different.
Yeah, well, Boris can't do nothing about Wales because health has devolved, to the Welsh Parliament under Mark Drakeford, First Minister, and Welsh Labour. I think, certainly for me, I'm an advocate for getting rid of the Coronavirus Emergency Act. I think it needs to be repealed completely. We need to get rid of it, because until then, the government still has the powers to literally take away social and civil liberties, because that's what they've done for the last over 18 months to 2 years. And I think until that is repealed, he's not going to do that. The announcement today is going to be around some of the plans that they have, where it's booster jabs, as you've mentioned, protecting those. And what concerns me, of course, as well, is workers in the NHS, care workers, mandatory vaccination. There's going to be a shortage of staff. Where are they going to get them from, especially the winter months? And people have to remember, I know I'm speaking fast, I'm a Welshman, by the way.
Right.
People have to remember that the NHS is always a crisis point in the winter. It has been for decades. This isn't something new. And the government have had 18 months to sort this out, and they still haven't done it.
Well, look, ladies and gents, as well, we are going to be doing later, as I teased earlier, our hero and villain of the day feature. Mercy hates it, I love it. But essentially what we're going to do is ask you who you think your hero of the day is. It's pretty straightforward, really. And who you think your villain of the day is. I'm going to throw over to your good self now and just ask, I know I've put you on the spot a little bit here. Keep those coming in, gbviews@gbnews.uk. At the end, we will be revealing who your heroes and who your villains of the day were. Have you got any to get us going?
Yeah, I think Emma Raducanu, obviously, for what she's achieved. A good Brit winning the tennis. It was fantastic. I mean, I watched it because I pay Amazon Prime, obviously, so I'm advertising there. I wasn't really, but it was great. I mean, it was emotional. For the whole country, it needed that kind of sporting lift. Definitely.
So she's your hero. Have you got?
Yeah, that's my. I have. Yeah, Nadeem Zahawi is definitely my villain. The guy blatantly, continually, constantly lies to the public, and I think he's one of the worst ministers we've had in the cabinet for a very long time.
Well, there you go. Strong stuff. Who are yours? Ladies and gentlemen? GB Views at gbnews.uk. We want to hear your hero and your villain. But thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure and a privilege to have you in the studio.
Hey, and you need more Welsh guests in here.
We
Honestly,
do.
You need, you know.
Absolutely do. 100%, Richard. Thank you so much. And make sure you check out the podcast as well, which is called...
Rich Politics.
There you are, Rich Politics. There we go. Thank you very much. Right, I believe we're moving away.
Yes. Well, let's read a couple of reviews first. They've been coming in, and then we'll go to our next stories. Lots, of course, on that vaccine issue.
Yes, OK. Well, look, just quickly then, we're going to go and say lots of love coming in for you, Richard, I must say. There you go. Richard Taylor.
I get a lot of love. I normally get a lot of hate on social media, so I welcome any of the nice comments.
That Welsh chap is brilliant. There you go. Have a bit of that. But, look, totally agree. A lot of people saying that they won't be voted Conservative at the next election. That's from Paul, discussing the idea they feel lied to, frankly, and on the controversy, which is, of course, whether or not people who were born men transitioned into womanhood should be competing female sport. As a born female, I have to accept that I cannot play alongside Cristiano Ronaldo at Old Trafford. Like all of us, people should accept what they cannot have. And that's from Sandra. Thank you very much, Sandra. Keep those views coming in. You can see the email there, gbviews@gbnews.uk, and give us your hero and give us your villain as well. Make sure that we hear from you. Some of these have been exceptional so far, and I cannot wait to get our very high-tech whiteboard out and stick pictures of them on it with blue tack. And Mercy's looking forward to it as well.
Yes, now to our next story. The government has announced new rules around the care home industry. All care home workers must have their first dose by this Thursday and be fully vaccinated by November the 11th, unless they